Good day everyone, my name is Siti Amani Ismail, first year student taking up Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Imishu Main, Marawi City. So now I'm going to present my topic in this course Bio-30 Microparasitology about a disease called stomach or peptic ulcer. So peptic refers to the stomach, and an ulcer is a sore or break in a membrane. So peptic ulcer disease describes having one or more sores in the stomach called gastric ulcers or duodenum called duodenal ulcers, which are actually common. Normally, the inner wall of the entire gastrointestinal tract is lined with mucosa, which consists of three cell layers. The innermost layer is the epithelial layer, and it absorbs and secretes mucus and digestive enzymes. The middle layer is the lamina propria, and it has blood and lymph vessels. The outermost layer of the mucosa is the muscularis mucosa, and its layer of smooth muscle that contracts and helps with the breakdown of a food. Now, in the stomach, there are four regions: the cardia, the fundus, the body, and the pyloric antrum. There is also a pyloric sphincter or valve at the end of the stomach, which closes while eating, keeping food inside for the stomach to digest. The epithelial layer in different parts of the stomach contains different proportion of gastric glands, which secrete a variety of a substance. Having said that, the cardia has mostly valvular cells that secrete mucus, which is a mix of water and glycoproteins. The fundus and the body have mostly parietal cells that secrete hydrochloric acid, and the sheath cells that secrete pepsinogen, which is an enzyme that digests protein. Finally, antrum has mostly G cells that secrete gastrin in response to the food entering the stomach. The G cells are also found in the duodenum and the pancreas, which is an accessory gland of the gastrointestinal tract. Now, gastrin stimulates the parietal cells to secrete hydrochloric acid and also stimulates the growth of glands in the epithelial layer. In addition, the duodenum has Brunner glands which secrete mucus rich in bicarbonate ions. In fact, with all of the digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid floating around, the stomach and duodenal mucosa would get digested if not for the mucus coating the walls and bicarbonate ions which secreted by the duodenum, which neutralizes the acid. Since the stomach walls are constantly exposed to the acid, they have a thick mucus layer than the duodenum, which is only momentarily exposed to the acid. In addition, the blood flowing to the stomach and duodenum brings in even more bicarbonate, which again helps neutralize the hydrochloric acid. Finally, small signaling molecules called prostaglandin get secreted in the stomach and duodenum, and they stimulate mucus and bicarbonate secretion as well as vasodilation of the nearby blood vessels, which allows more blood to flow to the area, and this promotes new epithelial cell growth. It also inhibits acid secretion. The cause of gastric and duodenal ulcers is infection with Helicobacter pylori, also known as H. pylori bacteria, especially in low-income countries and settings. H. pylori bacteria that colonize the gastric mucosa and release adhesion that helps them adhere to gastric valvular cells, as well as proteases that causes damage to mucosal cell. The majority of individuals with H. pylori don't develop any problems, but sometimes it causes a patchy pattern of damage that starts in the antrum, and it spreads to the rest of the stomach and eventually into the duodenum. Over time, the damage erodes deeper and deeper into the mucosa, eventually causing ulcers. Another cause of gastric ulcer leads to duodenal ulcers are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or NSAID, like ibuprofen. NSAID inhibits the enzyme cyclooxygenase, which is involved in the synthesis of inflammatory prostaglandins. Reducing the level of prostaglandins over a prolonged period of time, though, leaves the gastric mucosa susceptible to damage, and over time ulcer can start to develop. A rare cause of peptic ulcer disease is Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, which is due to a tumor called a gastrinoma. A gastrinoma is a neuroendocrine tumor that is typically located in the duodenal wall or pancreas and thus secretes abnormal amounts of gastrin. Gastrin stimulates parietal cells to release hydrochloric acid, which overwhelms normal defense mechanism and allows ulcer to develop in the first portion of the duodenum or even the distal duodenum or jejunum. Peptic ulcers that result from any of these mucosa damaging mechanisms are usually small, round punch-out holes in the mucosa. The ulcers usually have a clean base because the hydrochloric acid secretions and the constant churning is a bit like a dishwasher, actually keeping debris out of the ulcer. Typically beneath the base is a layer of scar tissue and blood vessel, and occasionally the ulcer can bleed if the erosion goes deep. Gastric ulcers typically form in the lesser curvature of the antrum. Duodenal ulcer, on the other hand, usually develop right after the pyloric sphincter, and there is usually Brunner gland hypertrophy, which is a consequence of the body trying to produce more mucus to protect the damaged area. Very deep ulcer can erode into underlying blood vessels and can cause bleeding, which is a problem that's extremely dangerous when there is a nearby artery. That's because hemorrhage into the gastrointestinal tract can happen, and this rapid loss of a lot blood can ultimately lead to shock. Two well-known dangerous spots are when there is a gastric ulcer on the lesser curvature of the stomach eroding into the left artery, and a duodenal ulcer on the posterior wall of the duodenum eroding into the gastroduodenal artery. Another complication is perforation, is when ulcer erodes all the way through the wall of the stomach or duodenum, allowing gastrointestinal contents like undigested food and gastric secretion to get into the peritoneal space, which is usually sterile. Perforation is a well-known complication of duodenal ulcers on the anterior wall of the duodenum. When they perforate, air starts to collect under the diaphragm, irritating the phrenic nerve and sending referred pain up to the shoulder. Finally, and very long-standing duodenal ulcers near the pyloric sphincter can sometimes have so much edema or scarring that they obstruct the normal passage of a gastric contents into the intestine, resulting in a gastric outlet obstruction. This can quickly lead to nausea or vomiting since the food literally can't get by. The main symptoms of gastric and duodenal ulcer is epigastric pain, which is an aching or burning in the upper abdomen. Other symptoms are bloating, belching, and vomiting. Classically, gastric ulcer pain increases while eating a meal due to the physical presence of the food, as well as hydrochloric acid production stimulated by the process of eating. On the other hand, duodenal ulcer pain decreases while eating a meal. This may be why gastric ulcers are associated with weight loss, while duodenal ulcers are associated with weight gain. Peptic ulcer can be diagnosed with upper endoscopy, which is a tube is snaked through the esophagus into the stomach and then the paroxysmal duodenum in order to see the ulcer itself. Usually during the procedure, a biopsy is done to make sure that there are no signs of malignant cells and to see if there are signs of an H. pylori infection. Treatment of peptic ulcers depends on the underlying cause. If there is an H. pylori infection, it's usually cured with a combination of antibiotics and acid-lowering medication, specifically proton pump inhibitors. Substances that can worsen peptic ulcers include NSAIDs as well as alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine. So it's best to stop using all of those as soon as possible, and in really extreme cases, surgery may be needed.